Good evening, everyone. My name is Carlia Swanson, and I'm just super excited to be back with another artist series. And today I have the honor, the pleasure of presenting my good friend, the guy that makes me sound like Beyonce. I mixed Beyonce and Massimo, but my good friend, Massimo Zaru-Roque. Massimo. Hi, Massimo.
Beyond Samoa's a new one. That's
Yeah, that is the level of greatness that you are at that I had to combine both.
oh, good, good. I get to be the audio version of Beyonce now. That's not pressure.
No, not at all. I'm so glad you're here, Massimo.
No, thank you. This is exciting. This is fun.
So, Massimo, in March,
Mm,
the world shut down. Take me back.
yes.
Where were you? What happened?
Um. Well, I was in my apartment. Um. And all my roommates were at Mason, and it was basically a big party of like, oh my gosh, spring break is a week longer, and it was like, whoa, okay, which was great because that kind of hit my like birthday, and I'm not like a big party person, but I was like, oh, everyone's around, you know what, we'll have a little fun at home, whatever, and then fun at home turned into a year. um
Yeah.
yeah, and it was definitely interesting. My main work at that time was essentially all freelance recording, and connecting with individuals, and suddenly we were in a place where that wasn't safe. That was not an option anymore because no one knew what was happening or how to solve it or what we were doing, and all we knew was, oh, it transfers through air. And I think half of the people I work with are vocalists, either jazz or classical. So
Not
it was
good.
it's a bad time for things that move through air. But yeah, a very interesting time there. Um, just a lot. I want to get more. I don't know if you want specifics. You gotta like what was the play by
No,
play
no,
here?
that's very true. I mean, I had the same kind of thing happen to me. We went on spring break, and they said, "Oh, spring break is longer," and it was really strange because this was the first spring break. I said, "Oh, I'll just stay at school and I'll work. It'll be fine." And then the world shut down. I was like, "Oh no, I gotta get out of here." Yeah.
You're like, wait a
So,
minute.
so Massimo.
Mm-hmm.
So, being an audio engineer, how has your job changed? Because I don't do audio engineering, but now I'm left to kind of like record myself, and everyone's doing like virtual projects.
Oh yeah.
So, how has work changed for you?
Um, not too much. I mean, you learn a couple new things that have always existed. Definitely brushed up a lot on mic sanitizing techniques, especially
Mhm.
for vocal mics, anything that might be shared among people. You start putting big things in when you're talking with people and potential clients. Big old, I like, essentially promising, hey, I'm doing my best to stay safe. I'm inviting myself into your space because my specialty is with on location and remote recording. So I don't have a studio or anything, as you know. I will go to a venue that the performer is at, or maybe their personal practice space at home, or maybe a personal church or rehearsal space at their school or institution. And in all of these settings, I consider myself the guest. So I was really big on trying to ensure that I was doing everything I could to be safe, to reassure them, and that I'm not bringing something into their home. Um, and aside from even just general distancing, now figuring out, all right, how are we recording X instruments or people safely in a space? Is it large enough and such? I got kind of conscious on the scheduling too. I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I was recording someone one day and then maybe 4 or 5 days down the line I was recording someone completely different, especially because this was around July, June, so still very much so in the heat of everything happening, and there wasn't a lot known. Still, all we knew was like people could be carrying COVID without knowing. They could be asymptomatic, and usually, if you are exposed, you want to quarantine for about 2 weeks. So I was trying to be very conscious of making sure, all right, I'm not scheduling things in where I'm putting people at risk, even if I'm potentially okay.
Yeah.
Um, and that was an interesting one. Just really trying to like taken these new risk benefits. Every gig suddenly turned less into a, oh, we're going out and having fun and making music, and more of like a cost benefit analysis of, okay, this needs to be done, but how can we do this safely,
That's
essentially.
so true, Massimo. And I love what you said about mic sanitation. Now
Mm-hmm.
I think about how many mics and pianos I just kind of ran up to and played, and now you have to
Oh,
wipe everything down and wipe the mics down. I'm like, we probably should have been doing that.
oh my gosh! I think back to I worked for like a year and a half at a guitar center at the Guitar Center in Fairfax, and that was in lessons. But even then, they'd give us these cool things. They'd be like, oh, if you want to play on one of the guitars off the wall for a lesson, like go for it. If one of the kids wants to grab one, sure. You just grab some guitar that you don't know how many people have touched, and it's gross and it's awful. And you're just holding that in your hand. And I think on that now, and I'm like, oh, we did that. Oh, because now I look at that and I'm like, I wouldn't trust any of that. I wouldn't go anywhere near that. It would not be communally interactive with public instruments. The worst was when I'm sorry, this is just really, especially in the context of now, when Guitar Center was really pushing their their acquisition of music and arts. Um, they brought in a very small selection of brass and woodwind instruments to the store, which meant a display for trial use version of a saxophone and a trumpet with just public reeds,
Nice.
a
That's
public
fantastic.
mouthpiece, and just people did that, and now it's like, well, we grow smarter with adversary, I suppose.
Not a good idea. So, Massimo, everyone is at home right now, and people are turning to music, books, their Netflix. So, what would you say the role of the arts is in a pandemic?
Oh boy. I think to me, especially being someone myself who spends so much time on social media, I was already pretty into it, and then with the pandemic, you're not going out, you're not seeing people, you're not really engaging in person. It became a whole lot harder. Now, like, not just staring at your phone, because that's where everyone is. So people are really active online. But as you've seen, and as a lot of friends of ours have done, a lot of musicians have used it as an opportunity to be more visible, if is the best way to put it, online. Do a lot more live streams, post a lot of different little, oh, I was practicing a song today, right? Little videos. And my favorite part of it, a friend said it was like, oh, it's like you post a really high quality video and then you do one that's like, oh, this is a pandemic video. I'm doing it for like a daily thing. Where really you're recording it from your phone. It doesn't have to sound great. It doesn't have to be like, oh, this perfect engineered thing, but you're a musician and you want to share what you're doing in a time where it seems like maybe we can't share it at all. And we don't know if we're going to share it again, at least in public, for who knows how long. And I think just giving, nowadays especially, with social media, with how affordable all the technology is, like your phones have a microphone, your laptops have a camera and a microphone, and they can both stream. You can get an interface, you can get mics or like a mixer that's USB, and you can make it fancy and dress it up as much as you want. But just the fact that utilities are there for musicians to share what they're doing, even still at home, um, has always been a little like cornerstone blessing. There's a nice little respite I get when I get a notification of, oh, some musician you haven't seen in a bit, like a Facebook friend or someone you follow on Instagram, is going live, and they're doing a little live stream performance. Or I've had another friend, musician out in Philadelphia, who's been doing Facebook live open mics, just stuff like that. I
That's a good
think
idea for me to
it,
take.
no,
Oh.
it's no, it's, I don't know, it's a great light in the kind of like mist of uncertainty.
Yeah, I really like how easy it is to connect right now. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
went to a Jasmine Horn masterclass and a Christian McBride
Mm-hmm.
masterclass, and so all these like famous people there at home too, and so we get to like connect with them a little easier.
Yeah.
So, Massimo, how has your role changed in the way of worship in church? Because people are able to be in large crowds, and that's what church is, a large group of people worshiping together. So, what is your role in that?
Oh yeah. So this is a great question because you're really honing in at the work I've been doing with First Baptist Church of Vienna, which has been a wonderful time. I mean, I was raised Catholic by my mother. I'm still Catholic. I'm still like practicing and believing.
Great.
And you know, music in Catholic churches is very different. We still had music, and it was an interesting scenario where a good friend of ours at our church when I was growing up actually had a more of like a CCM youth choir. So it was like radio music. It wasn't just kind of like choral stuff. She had it for the kids, and then later when I was in school at Mason, she had it for adults, and I played bass with that because it was in the evenings on Sundays, and I didn't have any class or homework or anything else to do. But definitely putting that into the perspective with the pandemic and doing my audio work at First Baptist has really kind of helped two areas that I realized I was sort of very much so desiring when it came to being an audio engineer. Um, the first one obviously being this idea of community building, right? I was raised so much from my mom, understanding church as it was a community. You would go there, and it wasn't just you being there; it was the people you spoke with, and of course, she, lovely Puerto Rican mother, loved talking to everyone until we were the last people walking out of the church.
Puerto
She
Rican
was
mother. That sounds like my grandma. You got to talk to everybody before
talk
you.
to everyone. No, and it's great because she was talking to my friend's other Puerto Rican mother as well, and like we'd all be leaving, and at that point I was just, you know, helping the choir director, my friend, just turn everything off, turn off the mixer, shut everything down, put everything away, right? Like just really cleaning up the space because I was like, oh, okay, yeah, service is done. Yeah, mass is over. We'll be leaving in half an hour. And just, you know, a great time with that. Community was really fostered within that. And the other thing I sort of grappled with as a student working as a recording engineer is, you know, doing work that wasn't really being seen by many. Not in, that sounds vain. Not in like,
Go ahead,
not,
Massimo. Tell us. Tell us.
well, not in like, oh, I want stuff to be seen. Like, I did this. No, like, you know, I was doing a lot of work with students recording auditions, or they were recording their recitals, right? And at that time, because we were all in class together and we were all growing through the university together, and then even I knew some younger students who I was working with. You know, it's a great moment to capture. At the same time, you know, I'd have these feelings of like I'd record something with a student, and they'd be like it'd be a junior recital, and they'd, you know, perform the best they had because they're a junior, but also it's educational, and their senior recital is going to sound better, and if they go out for pursuing their degree and their field even more, that's all going to sound even better. So they're like, yeah, I never want this recital to see the light of day. Thanks for recording it. I'm going to use it maybe for some auditions and like send it to my parents.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's, yeah. And then getting more out of the college circuit, I had a lot of more friends, like you and some of our friends and older people who now are really excited of, oh yeah, we put things online, right? We do this and that. And that was sort of feeding that for me, just the idea of, oh, things are out there. People are excited. They want to be visible. They want to share what they're doing. I love that. But then working with the church is essentially that on a consistent and
Yeah.
unshakable
I was going to
basis.
say, tell me what the work looks like, because since talking to you about you doing this job, when I watch my church's live stream, I'm like, okay, someone had to insert this audio right here, and someone had
Mm.
to insert this slide, and the worship team, and all of this. So how is that putting that all together?
Yeah, I really can't take credit for a lot of it. It really goes mostly hand in hand with Kwan McKnight, who is the music director at First Baptist, and Node Hadish, who is the videographer. They usually are there. I mean, yeah, today's Saturday, so they're probably going to be on till about like, what time is it right now? It is 6:45. So in about an hour or so, my phone's going to start blowing up with texts back and forth between them. They're going to get on a Zoom call watching through the service together after they've edited all the parts together. K1 will edit little parts together. Now it will edit parts together and like put the whole thing together. They watch it, make sure there are no bugs. all I really do is I just sit back at the parts where they're recording audio that isn't from like a cell phone or something, and I just hit record, and then my job is just to make it sound pretty after the fact, and I send it to Node, and he syncs it with the footage he got. Um, and it's expedited. It just out of necessity. Typically, we're recording on Thursdays, um, and we need to have things finished by Saturday night because it live streams on Sunday. And some days we're coming in on Saturday mornings and filming even some extra material that we need. Sometimes we're filming things for social media that we need to have due in the midweek. And when I first started the position, it was a very sobering moment to have a situation where I walk in. We recorded an entire there was a whole like rhythm section, gospel rhythm section, and maybe like 3 or 4 singers. They'd all do their thing. We set up, we do the recording session, and then it's like, all right, cool. Can we have that back in about 2 days? And I was like, oh, you will have it back in 2 days. I haven't done this before. Um,
Yeah, that's
but it
challenging.
was but it was good experience just in getting a lot of my basics and editing down quick. Um, Definitely now, especially seeing more in the chat between Node and K1, seeing more of how they expect the flow. Like they always, K1 will always send the flow of the service for how it goes. So I know exactly what to name files for Node. I know where to put things so it all makes sense. We've gotten really good at organizing our Dropbox folders with each other. Um, and it's a dream team to make it happen, which is great because then that way people can tune in the morning and see their service and feel that community and feel that connection and see that there is still church happening safely in a way that they can access, and I think that's really the important part. That's the part that's the most gratifying, just making it out there and reaching, like, giving this message out to people so they can still receive it even in a time where we feel like we can't receive a whole lot.
Wow, that is amazing, Massimo. I am so proud of you serving the church. Amen. So, Massimo, that is great.
Thank you.
Well, really, it is. I mean, to still be able to attend church and have people watch church at home, it is great.
Mm-hmm.
So, Massimo, the pandemic has brought upon many challenges. So, what are some creative ways you have used to combat those challenges?
Hmm. Um. Surprisingly, not too many on my end, especially. Well, so work was kicking back up, doing more of my freelance recordings with friends and with old colleagues around the June July time period. And my background is most of the time I've specifically worked with recording live music. My two main genres I've always done have been jazz, like combo jazz with vocalists, without like instrumental, whatever, just kind of small ensemble, and solo or chamber classical vocalists. Um, those have always been my two draws. And in both of those cases, the biggest thing with COVID was like, okay, I'm definitely working with singers. How do we stay safe? How do we keep people safe? Well, especially in the way I would record people, the way they want it to come off as a live performance, easy enough. If it's jazz and you have a band, the band's kind of behind the singer. So the singer's singing away from them. So it's like, okay, they keep their masks on. They're safe. We're good. Cool. All right. And then the same thing with the opera singers and the classical vocalists. Just their accompanist is behind them, or a lot of them opted to like have the accompanist somewhere to the side, and they're like, you know what, for the sake of an audition video, they don't need to be in the shot. They just need me. And then I could like do a little extra miking on the piano just to make sure I captured it and like blend it in. But at that point, it was kind of like, all right, this is a infectious air particle shotgun going off with the power of their voices. So you can sing facing the camera that's down there. I'm gonna be over here on the side with my masks on, making sure that we're just capturing everything. And really just kind of doing that. But beyond beyond that, thankfully, I haven't encountered a scenario where a space was too small or something that would be concerning. Um, I've been thankful enough as well to still record on some stages at Mason or have recorded some recitals in the University Harris Theater, and that that's been very very easy in the way of they have everything working like a well-oiled machine, running the CDC guidelines. I showed up and they were like, I had recorded there a bunch of times, almost 70% of like the recordings I did as a student were actually recitals in the George Mason Harris Theater for junior senior recitals. So Dan Hobson and Adriana, the two headrunners of that theater, have been very familiar with me, and I'm so thankful for all of their help through the years. And so a student tells them, "Oh, I'm being recorded by someone." They're like, "Okay," and I'll show up, and they're like, "Oh, it's you. Okay, you know the drill." And they're like, "Yeah, we have a little seat out here you can go to. We got to stay 30 feet away from the stage, do this and that." And I'm like, "All right, cool. I have cables long enough for that. Perfect." And then we have a great little chat at the end of the night after everything's done, and I'm wrapping like 50-foot cables because I was 30 away from the stage and all that. But thankfully, nothing crazy. Now, I do have to say that's because I've been working with also people being a bit more safety conscious. So I haven't had groups of singers who come to me or came to me saying, "Hey, you know what? We want to do a quartet or quintet right now in one room. Can we record that?" And I'm like, "Oh, bold choice today. Okay." But I mean, if faced with those challenges, it's really just about finding a space where you can do it safely, and keeping everyone spread and distant as much as you can for their own safety. Um, so it's always trying to think ahead of what might happen.
That is true, Massimo. I was there and I witnessed it. I was scared to even take my mask off, but you had everyone nice and spread apart when we did our
Mm-hmm.
live concert together. Another challenge I think for me is not being able to be with people. I'm really missing like a Mason jazz night.
Mm-hmm.
One creative way I think we've been able to combat that is with our Zoom calls and our Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Massimo. So we've been in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
So what is one thing you would say you learned about yourself in the quarantine?
Oh gosh.
Or maybe like a skill you were able to get back into.
What is something I've learned? Um, well, this is more of a general like quarantine one, like the heartstrings. I definitely I tend to miss people a lot more than I guess I thought I would. I before college, I had this weird thought in my head that I was like really introverted. I think I was just incredibly like socially awkward and just afraid to like expand on a lot of that. And then I got to college and I like had to. So okay, here we go. And then I was like, wait, people are great. This is awesome. But definitely the doldrums of quarantine. I didn't really find out how much I would definitely miss just hearing people, speaking with them. I would text people, I would keep up with people as much as I could. Everyone's posting on social media. But I really started to just become a fan, as of FaceTiming people.
I know.
Yeah. Or just like having a phone call, right? Just something about being able to speak.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that when you speak to someone, you can hear them, and 80 to 90% of what I'm doing involves hearing things. It's totally whatever. Yeah, that wouldn't happen. But just definitely, hearing the sound of a voice and knowing that everyone's still kind of going through it, but we're all working together and still can communicate, and everyone's still kind of right there for when things start blowing over and settling into a new kind of normal, much safer kind of normal, has been really, really helpful thought for me. Beyond that, I've learned I'm really good at binge watching TV, which I was always terrified of. As you can attest, undergrad in the school of music at Mason, were focused on practicing our
I didn't
classes.
have a
And
TV for like the first 2 years.
I
I didn't.
never had a TV. My
Oh.
roommates had TVs. Um, we didn't watch things. I mean, I like I'd go along with like general things. Like some of my friends and I, we'd like kick it back. We'd watch like some anime or something. Like stream up a show, like maybe on the weekend or something. But nothing crazy. I never had Netflix. I never had, on the dorms they were like, you get HBO Max for free. I never used that. Um, and while everyone would be binging shows or talking about this and that, I was like, no, I gotta practice. And it
That's
wasn't even like a better than that thing. I was just like, no, I don't. I'm like busy. I don't have time for this. And I don't want to pay for Netflix. Um, and I wasn't even like going out and seeing movies or stuff either because I'm not a huge like movie theater goer. So there was that whole like span also of like movies like Marvel movies, all this and that were super popular and like pop culture references that I just like missed out on at the time. I just didn't do it. But then here we are. We're in pandemic, and I've kind of put myself into like a machine mode where I would like be waking up at 10 a.m. I would practice some stuff on electric for about 2 or 3 hours. Maybe do a little. I don't even know, like not really practice, just more playing around for fun on guitar for like maybe an hour and a half or so. And then my hand's tired, so maybe I'll do stuff on the computer. I'll start editing for a couple hours, get work done, maybe watch a couple videos, and then I'll be like, great. It's 4 or 5 in the afternoon. What do I do now? Um, and my sister, about a year ago, was like, hey, use my Netflix. And I was like, cool. And she was also like, hey, use my Hulu. And I was like, okay, sick. So you're paying for both? And then, like, I said that like 3 months later. I was like, I can pay for Hulu if you want. And she looked at me and she was like, I'm not paying for Hulu. And I was like, I'm not paying for Hulu. How do we have Hulu? But somehow we have Hulu.
wow.
Um,
I'm really happy for you, Massimo.
yeah, but
I
as
feel like there's been so many different like phases of. I feel like there's been so many different phases of quarantine. Like at first, I
mm,
got my drum set out and I had to change all the drum heads. And then I went through a phase where I was making like these healthy smoothies. And then I went through a phase where, and then I started teaching lessons and that took up all of my time. But I've just been
mm.
able to like get back into so many like creative projects. What about you, Massimo?
Yeah, no, that's been a good one. Beyond the well, a good cap end to the whole Netflix and Hulu thing is you watch something, you finish it way too fast because you spent days just in a row doing only that in between all of your other like necessities, and then you're like, wow, I have this emptiness. I don't know what to do right now. I don't know what I can do. Let's write a song about it. Let's work on that. Um, so that's definitely been a fun one. I've been really trying to work at reconciling what I feel like my voice as an artist is.
Mm,
Um, as much as I love audio engineering and recording and mixing, like that is career goals, right? But I still like to write things. I still like to be creative. And to me, it's always it's been that balance of marrying the fact that I'm an instrumentalist and I've done so much with different live genres and I have all these tastes from this one side, and then the fact that I grew up in middle school listening to like EDM and like have this like huge production like side and like making those two fit together in a way that feels cohesive. That was something I never while studying in undergrad felt I could do. I
mm,
either would make a song and it felt way too kind of like produced EDM-y, whatever. It just felt like I made some like beat with cool synths or something, right? And like I still wanted to sing on stuff because I was like, that's the most me thing I can do on it, right? Like put my voice on a song. No one can replicate that. That's like, oh, there I am. Um, but I'd just make this stuff and I'd be like, oh, that sounds great. Kind of mix it down, whatever. And would come to writing lyrics and I'd be like, I don't want to write lyrics to this. This sucks. And then on the other hand, I would like think of these things that like maybe I could or couldn't play yet on my instrument, but I would have just have a great time recording them, working them out, right? And like then they would end up really rocky or like folky, and I was like, I don't know if this is like what I want though, because I feel like I'm ignoring this whole other like part of what I want to do. But quarantine is great because you can just experiment.
I like what you
Um,
said about music school, but that's so true. Like in high school, I did like student government and I did
mm-hmm,
like this radio broadcasting program. And I thought I'm going to go to college, I'm going to do music, student government, radio broadcasting. I'm going to do all of these things.
mm-hmm.
And then like theory one and oral skills one and lessons and ensembles. And I was like, wait a minute. There's no way possible for me to like focus on all these different
Yeah,
aspects.
no.
So
Which,
Massimo, oh, sorry.
uh, oh no, 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 you're all right.
No. You go, Massimo.
Well, yeah, I mean, and at least that kind of helped. I have a respect for thanks to being in school and only having as much time for me to work on like personal music essentially, like music I wanted to write, I wanted to work with. Um, that already kind of gave in that respect of like, all right, my work is working with audio and I have work I need to get done on a daily schedule. But also, now that means I'm also good at managing that time for when I do have that freedom. I know, ooh, I can use this as personal music time. And I think a big thing was just with the start of pandemic that was daunting and it was like, oh, I can do anything. Ugh, I can do anything, right? And then it's like, oh, how do I approach this? But
Yeah.
yeah, but now I think it's, with practice habits and just easing into it, it's been getting a bit better, which I'm just thankful for, kind of getting into a rhythm.
Yeah, that's really good. Massimo, so we talked about creative projects, music, audio engineering. So how did you end up being a math major?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, that's the one. Alrighty. Well, it's a tale old as time when a lovely, beautiful young woman from Puerto Rico meets a dashing young man from
Oh my
Italy in their English classes in D.C. And they decide that the dashing young man from Italy is going to transfer up a level in the English courses as a bet from a friend, and he was not prepared to transfer up that level, so he could talk to that very very just wonderfully beautiful Puerto Rican woman.
God.
And then they lived in D.C. And then they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have kids. Let's move out of D.C." And then here we are, growing up. And I have an older sister, and there was always a big thing within our family of the fact that my parents both immigrated here, and neither of them really had degrees. So both my sister and I were first generation students. Um, and even from growing up, there was always the big notion of we're doing things because it will help further our education. And like it was never like a like Tiger Mom kind of thing where it was like you're gonna do this thing you hate and you're gonna like it. Like I think there were like little moments where I guess it felt like that when I was a really young kid, but like that's just because I don't know, you're an 8-year old and it's like you're gonna do something, it builds character. But that especially going into college, there was a big significance with that of the idea of being accepted to college and going through the steps with financial aid, really seeing what our family could or couldn't afford, really kind of weighing those options. And especially just seeing the sacrifice and the work going into that, there was always kind of the expectation of doing something that would reward outwardly, right? I had always done well at math in school. It was something I was just naturally good at, um, but I just kind of did it, and that was essentially the option going in for school, where it was like, all right, you're going to do math because also like jobs and careers in math pay huge, especially right now. Just so many diverse fields hire for it. I have a lot of information on the careers you can have in math. I used that to convince myself that it was what I liked.
Oh my gosh.
But you know, I always felt like I wanted to keep music around because I'm guessing you want to know how I went from math to music, right?
Yeah. So how
Yeah.
did you pick audio engineering? Yeah.
Well, the audio engineering was always kind of there. I remember I got my first digital audio like workstation like recording program when I was in middle school. I'd been saving up from some birthdays and family events, and I had gotten half of the money. I think it was like $400, and like the program was $600. And I like really like just like my parents. I'd been talking about it because I was excited, and they knew about it, and I was super thankful. Like my dad like actually like had saved money and fronted to get the rest of this program. Ableton, which is just it's more for like producing this and that. I liked it because I was listening to Skrillex at the time, and I had read in different articles that Skrillex used Ableton, and I was like, I want to be like Skrillex. So it was like one step at a time, getting those things, writing little songs. But like that was just something I did, right? And then in high school, I was in a guitar program. I really enjoyed it. That was kind of where my love for music started. But then going to college for math was almost like it almost felt like closing the chapter on that. And it was a little like, here's this thing that I suddenly came to love and that I really enjoyed. That was like, all right, it's time to go do the adult things, though. Time to go do this and that. You can only do that when you're having fun. Um, and I didn't think I was good at lying to myself because I always kept music really close. Even my freshman year, going into school, I knew I needed a work study job, and I went on the like Mason work study portal that they had at that time, and lo and behold, there was an opening for a student worker and office receptionist in the School of Music office at George Mason. And I was like, hey, when I was president of my guitar program in my senior year, I did a bunch of like filing different, like organizing music libraries and instrument management and all this and that. This sounds perfect. Um, this won't lead to anything at all, I'm sure. And I would just see the different students and professors coming in and do their things, and I'd be photocopying scores for them. And eventually I made the decision. I'd brought my upright with me to college, annoyingly, I'm sure to the awful intrusion of my two roommates and my forced triple that freshman year. And I would practice it in the common room, which is usually where I would chill with a bunch of my friends. We all had a lot in common, even though like I hadn't talked to a lot of people not related to music. So that was a big like freshman year kind of change where it was like, all right, everyone's in their dorms and everyone's in different majors. But I was like, yeah, I like music. I play bass. I like jazz. I do this and that. And they were like, oh, that's awesome. And I was like, hey, I'm sort of kind of thinking maybe I like want to audition for the major, And they were like, oh, that's great. And I was like, yeah, I don't really have a space to practice. And they were like, oh, I mean, just like in the back of the common room, I guess, whatever. And I was like, yeah, but like, ain't y'all like, y'all are playing games or watching TV and whatever. And they're like, whatever. Um, and yeah, and it was just like that kind of space and support where I was really able to kind of take back what I wanted. And just the further I got in school, I did end up making the music major into my sophomore year. And just that year was just the big example of, okay, this whole math thing isn't working. It wasn't a passion. I was really losing out on classes, and like they weren't making sense anymore, because that natural, I guess, skill kind of only goes so far without the enjoyment and application of it. And I was like, I just can't see myself in this field at all. So then I kind of just switched to music.
That's great, Massimo. That's so important. You have to love what you do. Massimo, so once you got into the School of Music, what was your game plan like? Because I don't think there was a busier man than Massimo. I mean, you were in the vocal ensemble. I met you in a jazz combo. You were in Green Machine. You did voice lesson, you did bass lesson. You did this, you did that. You did your audio. You did. So, what was your game? Did you like do that strategically?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I was like just enamored, right? I had never like as a young child, I think I played violin from like third grade till like middle school, and I remember we had lessons for like a couple years while we could afford them. But especially when it came to bass, which was an instrument I'd been playing since high school, I'd never had a private teacher. Everything was self-taught. So then I went in, and it was like, all right, here's a Professor Reagan Bruck. He plays for the Army Blues. Enjoy. You get to meet with him for an hour a week. I was like, oh, okay. And like I like wasn't the best lessons student. Like there was a lot of learning I had to do on my end to really upkeep everything. I don't know if it's something I ever quite figured out. But everything was just fantastic and entertaining, and it was like this whole world of everything I had wanted, right? Like I remember going into keyboard skills, and it was at like 8:30 in the morning, but I was chugging coffee in the dining halls because I wanted to go in, and I was like, all right, this time for a class is soul crushing, and I'm at a digital keyboard and I'm staring at a wall while I'm practicing scales, and I was like, but I don't know how to play piano, and the point of this class is to get me to play piano. That's awesome. Okay. Or I remember just being fascinated by ear training, by oral skills, because I didn't even know of that as a concept. Um, and just the idea of I'm going to hear a chord or a melody and just know what that is, like that was completely foreign. I didn't know that was a real thing. So it was almost like magic to me. It was like this is some unreal thing, and now you can learn it too. And I was really bad at it at first. I was bad at a lot of it. I remember a lot of hours that freshman year. This is probably where or that sophomore year. This is probably why the math classes started straggling a lot. I was spending hours in the practice rooms. Especially with like ear training, just making sure I could hear what I had. And it was really just kind of, this is exciting. Like, I might not get an opportunity to do this again, especially in a setting where I'm at school for it. I have nothing else to worry about except this, right? Like, food is easy. There are dining halls. I have jobs already, so that's already set. All of my classwork relates to music. Everything I'm doing relates to music. Everything is just my practice. And I was like, this is just an opportunity where that's all I need to focus on. And it just felt like a blessing. And that just extended even further. Once I was getting further and further in my recording and music tech classes, I got really into the idea of how things are recorded, why we hear things, just sound and recreating sound in general, how we hear something out in a world, whether it be an ensemble or a sound effect or whatever, but some recording and mixing engineer can place like 14 mics around some like random crazy number around one thing, and then you're just hearing it through two ears. But they can make those 14 things suddenly sound like you were in the room. Like, that was wild to me. I was like, how do they do that? Why does that work? I want to do that more. And then I was blessed with really good friends who, one of them was like, oh, I'm having a non-degree recital. And she was like, you do recording stuff. Do you want to record it? And I was like, oh, yeah. Which then just got me in there. And I was like, I can just record recitals and also hear music that I usually wouldn't hear, right? Or like wouldn't have known to seek out on my own. I was like, this is great. Like, why isn't everyone doing this? This is perfect. So I think I was definitely running around more like an excited child, every step of the way, which I'm thankful for. It's not like it ever got old or boring. There was always something new. I was like, here's a skill I can learn that I need to learn because I'm not going to get an opportunity like this again. It was just fun.
That's so true, Massimo. Because now I think about that all the time. I'm like, wow, I should have really appreciated that time more with everything being right there, being able
Mm-hmm.
to spend a dedicated amount of time to just like one skill. You can do it over and over and over and over and over. But
Mm-hmm.
now it's just like you have to work. There are responsibilities. It's great.
And I think just the a lot of it really just goes into the professors at Mason. A lot of their heart, obvious biggest influence probably for both you and I, Dr. Purcell, Darden Purcell, just incredible. I definitely that was one. Um, as I was getting further in my tech classes, it was a little heartbreaking, and like I had to start coming to my own realization of like, I'm probably not going to be a professional bass player. Like, at least definitely not at the level of people who are like studying that and just that for like 8 hours a day. I have to do all the recording stuff. I have to figure a lot of this out. And I enjoyed the lessons. But I wanted to try and figure out more opportunities of learning what would aid me as a sound engineer and just as a general well balanced musician. And I was like, oh wow, the director of our department is also a military retiree for voice, and she hosts the jazz vocal ensemble. Um, why would I pass that up? So I very nervously auditioned in. I don't even remember how I auditioned in. I think that's for better. It's for the best. I think it was like a. I think I went in and I was just like kind of like I didn't know I was auditioning when I was in fact auditioning to be
Wow.
like a student for Dr. Purcell or something. Like that was a very like I was just nervous. I didn't know what was happening. It was a bad time, um but just taking that step was a fantastic moment because I was like, I sang in like church choir and whatever growing up, but like I hadn't studied singing, and I hadn't studied vocal jazz, and just having the opportunity of a professor who's so skilled and versed in it and such a wonderful educator, I was like, I need to learn something different. I need to like feel the discomfort of trying to like struggle against something new, um, to put myself in the shoes of maybe how musicians feel in a recording session, maybe how they feel if it's their first time doing audition videos, right? Their first time being in front of microphones and cameras, and you know what feels uncomfortable. How are artists thinking? How are musicians mentally prepared, right? So I just kind of roundabout said I need every skill I can, and being thrown straight into the fire of a vocal jazz ensemble was definitely a healthy lesson. That was a good one.
Yeah, that's what I love about Mason, though. I love about Mason and Dr. Purcell is that is really a place like if you want to do something, there would be an opportunity to showcase that talent. Like you, like at our jazz festival and in
Mm-hmm.
everyday practice, like there's an opportunity to really use all of your gifts at Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Massimo. So, what makes a
Yes.
good audio engineer?
Oh, I don't know if I can answer that. I
Can you
mean,
tell me what should people look for when they're looking for an audio engineer? How do I know if they're good or bad?
uh, you listen to what they do.
Uh-huh.
You ask for work that they've done similar to what you're doing, and you listen to it, and you're like, do I like how this sounds, or does this not sound great, right? And there's a difference between like taste and actual like quality, right? Because there are things you can ask like, oh, this thing's a little loud, this could be a little quieter, whatever. That's your taste, right? If you're listening to a mix, does it sound good? Does it sound bad? Does something sound like there's an issue in it? Even if you're not an audio engineer, you have a pair of ears. You know what you're looking for. Like, you know what sounds good, right? Like, trust them, right? But definitely one of the things that always struck me, um, it's just like, can I answer this inversely? Like, can I say the skills I hope to show as an
Yeah,
audio engineer?
that's good. That's
that
good.
that feels a little easier, right? I want to kind of show as an audio engineer that I'm listening,
Mm.
right? I'm not just there. Um, in one of my later lessons with Reagan, actually, with Professor Brock, we had a really good conversation about engineering. He had done one of the Army Blues recordings, and he was just chatting about how, in his past, like places he had recorded at and worked at, right? He would go in, and he's someone who's played his bass for decades. His hands, the way he plays, how he plucks that tone, that's integral to his sound. How his bass sounds is how he is deciding it to sound physically by the work he's put in. And he was like, and sometimes it's just disheartening because you're bringing your sound in, which is also the sound that your colleagues are used to hearing and that you've all been rehearsing with, and you record it somewhere, and then you hear it back after the engineers have mixed it down, and you, as an independent instrument, might sound completely different,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a difference between how you sound on your instrument, and like you might get an engineer who's like, all right, but they sound like this, but here's what I think a bass sounds like. And they're gonna EQ it, they're gonna shape it, put different like effects in different ways to make you fit into this whole of what they know works, which sometimes is for better. Sometimes, like, right, like not every instrumentalist is a mix engineer. You need to like mesh things together. But on the other hand, it's a shame when it's like, that musician has spent all this time trying to make this their sound, right? And my big idea, always going in, I mean, my favorite thing I love to do is I'll be recording things, then it's like, oh, take off the headphones and listen to it, right? Really I can't just be tracking and be sucked into my world of like, okay, I put all my mics here, here's how we're gonna mix it, here's a no, like this is a performance. Even if it's in a studio, even if it's on a stage and no one's watching other than the microphones and the cameras, right? Listen to how the group sounds. And to me, my biggest goal is always for like capture the recording the best, but then make what I've recorded sound like what happened live, right? Make it sound like what the musicians were hearing, listen to what they're doing, and be able to reassure the musicians, yeah, like I hear and see and know what you're trying to do. And I want to help that. I don't want to hinder that. I don't want to take something about you away from the recording. I want to help you translate that to other people listening.
That's so true, Massimo. You know how I pick an audio engineer, Massimo?
How?
I feel like I can sing just a little bit. So if you make me sound worse, maybe you're not the one.
That, yeah.
Yeah. Because these people, they touch them up and stuff. So if they can do that, they can do that to me. But if then they can't do that and I sound worse, then
Yeah, that's
so Massimo, you kind of already told me how you got your start in music. So what would you say are some lessons that you've learned from music, like life lessons?
Oh gosh. Oh. Um Easily time management. That was a bad one in my life.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, but just putting all that together, self-care was a good takeaway. There was always kind of a joke when everyone was we're all real young and in school, and it was like, exactly who I'll be talking about when it's like we had some friends who were practicing like 6 to 8 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
They're in the practice room sun up to sundown, and it's like, it's great, it's cool, but like people aren't eating, people aren't really taking time to rest themselves, people aren't doing, and it seems superhuman, and okay, it got them where they are. I have one friend who and I don't know if they even watch this or if they pick up on this, but like I have no shame in saying this. I remember making a full stop statement to them, being like, "Look, a single bag of raw kale is not a meal for the day."
I think I knew who this friend is.
Yep. Yeah. I don't care how long you're in that practice room. Just you can pack it away for a sec. Just take half an hour. Go get some food. Go walk or something. Right. And that kind of, as we were getting older, that kind of like, I'd see freshmen trying to do the same thing, and they're scared and they're with their classes and they're freaking out and they're new to everything. And I would always try to talk to them and be like, look, just remember, practice is not a replacement for a good meal.
Yeah.
Like, just go have a good meal, go chill for a sec, it'll clear your head, and then you can come back and the practice can still happen.
Yeah.
But if you run yourself ragged, then that's never going to work. And I had some experiences myself of running myself ragged through school. I definitely, I was battling some health issues, so chronic health issues as well, in between stress piling those on, as well as just running myself thin around trying to do too much at many times, and really realizing that I needed to pull back and really kind of focus where I'm putting my attention, because if I can't put good attention towards what I'm doing, then I'm not doing any of it well.
Yeah.
And that's just not helpful. So definitely learning to listen to myself and learning to understand when I need to step back and maybe take a break and maybe recharge that focus has just been a great lesson. And I think one that definitely, in the ambiguity of a pandemic, has really kind of come to help, right? Like, you can't worry about every single thing. Sometimes you just have to like actually step back and say, okay, like, let's just focus this. Let's take a 30-minute meal break. It's okay. Like, freaking out over a schedule is not replacement for a meal.
Yeah, that's so true in the pandemic, because I always like to know what's next. Like, what am I going to do next? Okay, once this is over, what am I going to do next? And for the first time, I don't know. And I'm kind of okay with that, because I guess from the uncertainty of the pandemic, you talked about self-care. And I think one thing that helped me with self-care, strangely, is grad school, because you're in grad school with older people. So first semester, here's a little story. We had like a study group, and everyone's like, we got to pass the test. We're studying for the test. And this guy's like, I'm going to play with my kids. And I'm like, well, if you're leaving, I'm leaving too, then,
Yeah,
so
he's like, all right, my life is bigger than a story group or a
yeah,
study
so I
group.
started to think like, it's okay to take time to do other things. So,
Yeah.
Massimo, who would you say were some of your musical influences growing up?
Oh my gosh. Oh boy. Definitely. I already threw this one in, which is like the very like shameful one. Like, oh man. But like, I listened to a bunch of electronic music, and it was like I was like 11 or 12, and I was at my cousin's house, and he like pulled out his computer or whatever, and was like, "Dude, have you heard this guy Skrillex? Like, it's tight." And not to say that changed my life, but I had my first ever little iPod and made my first ever little purchase in the apps in the like the Apple Music store. And it was Skrillex. And
Wow.
I was just like, wow, dubstep, electronic music, big bass noises, ew. Which to be fair though, like, and I guess this is why maybe I was just always going to end up as like an engineer or something. My big thing with that was like, okay, it's flashy, it sounds cool, it's big, there's sub bass, whatever. But I was like, I didn't know it was called sound design until I was a little older. But just like I was like, oh, they're making this from synths, so it's kind of like the big rag on it, especially at that time, was all the dance music was like you had almost like a pedal point, which is hilarious to say, right? You had like a single kind of like droning sub bass note while like you had just drums going and like a cool rock sounding pattern, and you have these like crazy monster synth sounds or whatever going on that sound really cool or anything, and like people would be like, oh, this is boring musically, like you're just playing one note, which yeah, sure, okay. But to me, I was sitting there and I was like, whoa, like the music isn't complicated. But none of these instruments existed until they opened up some program and made them. So they
Wow.
had to make their own ensemble. Um, and that was just crazy to me. And then I got sucked into that world for a decade of just listening to producers, really getting into that. Then getting into high school in the jazz guitar program, my teacher was like, "You got to start listening to some jazz. You got to start doing anything else other than this." He was like, "Listen to some rock or something," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And I started to, and he was like, "Okay, cool. Now like go listen to a jazz bass player." And I was like, "How do I find them?" And he was like, "Google a jazz bass player. You'll find them." Uh, and I started getting into the big one first for me. Um, Charles, yeah, no, it was Charles Mingus, because I was looking into a lot of the bass players, and I really had no context for them yet. I didn't have any education on like jazz history or the background. So I had no idea he was more modern or anything. I was just pulling up like playlists about like jazz bass players, and his oh gosh, I have to look up the name, but it was off of Changes 2. Um, his album Changes 2. It was just the orchestration just on all of those songs though was just fantastic, and I know just Mingus in general is just a incredible arranger, and just powerhouse. But I think that really opened me up. It did nothing to help me educate myself on bass players, because at that point then I just kind of like stopped there, and I was like, wow, because at that point I was like, I'm not just looking for bassists anymore. Like, listen to those horns, listen to how this all sounds. Like, oh, this is crazy. Like, this is awesome. So it stunted a bit of that there. I eventually found a few others. Found Christian McBride through my friends. Found found Thundercat right before college early on, because I was blessed with friends who were a couple years older than me. Like, I had a friend who was a year older than me, and then he went to study down at VCU for jazz guitar. So then, he came back like the first break, and he was like, "Have you heard of Kendrick Lamar?" And I was like, "No, not really." And he was like, "Oh man, he has this album. It's called To Pimp a Butterfly. Like, you should really listen to this. Like, this is awesome. It's got all this jazz stuff going on." And I was like, "Oh, whoa, this is awesome." And it still is. And then he was like, and there was like another summer, and he was like, "Have you heard of this guy Kamasi Washington?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, Yeah, he's out in LA too. He's like doing all this cool stuff. Hey, Thundercat's in his band too. Hey, he's all these other cool players. His album's like 3 hours long. And I was like, oh, okay. Um, and it's funny because that's an album that I think even now sometimes I've grown a little past like the nuance and density and maybe flashiness of, but like there were a lot of people in there too that I really got into. And I wanted to lead to that because oh boy, um,
Oh boy. But that's the one thing I love about being in like school and around music friends because oh, you're singing this song, and then someone says, "Well, have you heard Common McRae sing it? Have you heard Nancy Wilson sing it? Have you heard
mm-hmm.
this person? Have you heard that person?" You get exposed to so much music that way.
Yeah, and just hearing things from people that you just wouldn't know. That was definitely like my jazz education definitely happened at Mason. I think the stuff I was hearing in high school was more of I think it put me in more of like a creative element. Definitely kind of bringing it back to that Kamasi Washington band and like bassists I really liked. The other bass player in his band was Miles Mosley, who no idea who he was at the time. He was just playing bass as like a recording bass player, and he was doing production and just orchestrating work out in LA as well, out in that area. And all I knew about him at the time is we saw Kamasi Washington and his band live at Howard Theater, and I would think I was like freshman year or whatever. And this guy comes out, does this great kind of like Louisiana blues song, and he's doing these like great bass lines while he's playing, and then he pulls out his bow and he starts soloing with a wah pedal and like a
Oh,
fuzz and distortion on it, and it was just all this stuff. He has this like he's like I looked up interviews because I was like, oh, that's awesome. And it wasn't even really it wasn't like jazz licks. It wasn't any vocabulary or anything. It was just really cool bluesy pentatonic stuff. But just the combination of that and the tech and seeing an upright do that like was so new to me, right? Like, Esperanza Spalding was an incredible arranger and she would sing and play. But I heard Miles Mosley and I was like, oh, this is something that's like really kind of pushing like the idea of what does this instrument do? Um, and I think I'm probably a bad jazz student because to me that just like got me so much more fascinated than the idea um, of like the language, right? Like I'm still curious about it. I love it. I love how it develops. And just I love keeping my ears sharp for it. I think it's just I'm just like too excitable for the flashy stuff, I guess. And you get like that's how I fell into like the whole traps of like, oh, how do we make things sound like that? How do we do this, right? Like that's
but that's
always been
incredible,
fun.
Massimo, especially what you said about Skrillex.
Oh
I
yeah.
never thought, when I don't listen to electric music a lot,
Mhm.
but when you said like how they created those sounds, I've never listened for like, oh, this is an instrument that they created and they recorded it, and
Yeah, and it's really funny, even like especially today. Some of that's gone a little to the side. Kind of in like two ways, right? We're getting a resurgence of a lot of people are really bringing back right, because with a lot of like that 2010s era, a lot of people were really big on what were called soft synths, so just software synthesizers. They're in your computer. You put MIDI notes in, whatever. Maybe you have a MIDI controller. A lot of people were really kind of wanting to get back to a connection of like what felt human. So getting analog synths or just like keyboard synths that you are actually playing and you have to record the audio from directly. A lot of people are getting back into that. Um, and also, um, just kind of the inclusion of now samples and sample packs becoming a big thing, especially in the hip hop world, finding a big idea of people essentially using synths to make their own sounds. But instead of that, I remember like back in like the EDM trend, right? Like you could tell which song was by which producer or who was trying to copy what producer because they were trying to make their synths sound the same as that other guy. It was kind of like you're a restaurant trying to copy someone else's secret formula or something, and it's like, no, Wendy's, just be Wendy's. You're not gonna be Popeyes. It's okay, whatever, right?
before.
Um, but that kind of then turned into people just wanted access to sounds that they didn't know how to make. So samples started coming in. Obviously, not just for like drum samples, because people were like, "Well, I don't have a drummer, but I want to make beats. I want to make a groove." But even like, people have samples for everything. They have little horn lick samples, they have a little synth hit, maybe they have a little chord progression you can chop up. And all that already comes from its history of sampling off of records, a lot of the hip hop era. Um, so it was just familiar ground, but now we could integrate nuanced sound design with it. And you were kind of seeing a step away from these big kind of like flashy bombastic things, and everything's more subtle, and it's a lot more like the songwriter is curating this like taste of sound for you and really bringing it in. So it's like nowadays maybe even like the person might not be responsible for making the synth sounds, they're sampling from somewhere, they're doing this and that, whatever, right? They're the orchestrator, they're the conductor, they're taking that, they're picking and choosing what their ensemble is, and they're putting it together for you to hear. And once again, it's like technically those instruments don't exist, especially if you're resampling them. They only exist in a digital format, right? You're taking it out of like the this was played by someone, and you're making a new instrument the second you recreate it, right? Whether that was sampling on records and doing DJing, or bringing things into beat pads with like the whole Akai MPC era, or even now with taking samples off of online or sampling into a DAW and looping the audio like that.
Wow, Massimo. So, Massimo, do you remember the first song you wrote? And what was it about? Or what did it sound like? Or what was the genre?
Oh gosh, I don't know about. I remember the first song I tried to produce.
And how did that go?
So, so I don't know why I don't remember any of the others. I remember this one, obviously, because I was like, oh, it was my first. Let me try it. I think even like a year later, I listened to it and I was like, oh no. Um, so it was like my first month of having Ableton. So I was like 13, 14. And there was this one producer at the time, because I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be making these like crazy sound design sounds or whatever. But there was one producer, who's definitely still around and making music. He was called Flux Pavilion, um, and he had a couple of hits. A big kind of like YouTube, right? Because YouTube at the time was big for promoting a lot of EDM as well, and dubstep and such. There was this United Kingdom channel called UKF, and they would put some of his songs out there, and he'd have hits. And his whole kind of idea was, the breakdowns, the drops of the songs were like you'd have like a little verse, this and that, vocal hook for your structure, and then your breakdown is like a big root bass note, and then essentially just chords on top. Layered chords, maybe with different synth colors, whatever, but you're just kind of everything was almost like a big wall of synth, usually like harmonized in like triads, this and that, just very kind of like block layering of chords, and it would just all hit you at once. And to an extent, that was kind of like adrenaline rush in a way where you're just like, I was like, I haven't heard something like this before. And it felt straightforward for me to do, so I tried making a little song like that. And it was just the worst.
No.
It was like default like I also saved up. I got the synth for dubstep. There's a synth called Native Instruments Massive. Massive and Native Instruments FM8. They were one was just a kind of additive subtractive synthesizer. The other was an FM synthesizer. And those were kind of the two big ones going around at the time that everyone was using for dubstep and everything and electronic music then. And FM synthesis is complicated. I still don't wrap my hand around it. Like the frequency of one thing modulates the frequency of another, and a whole lot happens. And that's a part of sound design I'm scared of. Like I get it, but I can't be creative with it. But additive and subtractive, it's easy. One wave looks like this, another wave looks like that. You put them together, they sound like they're both happening. Cool. But I was a kid and I didn't really know how to make that sound good. And I also didn't understand what arranging was. So I think I had like a root note that was in like 3 octaves. So it was like a sub octave, a sub octave, and then a kind of low mid octave. And then I had chords, just like just triads blaring, and then like I had the same triads up an octave also blaring. Like this would just all hit you at once. Like you just have a weird little like drum beat, and there was some melody, like some throwaway whatever, and then just like here's a major triad, here's a minor triad, just like the worst conceivable
That
thing.
sounds good, Massimo. Sounds really good.
I
For
wish
my
I had it
13th
still.
birthday, I got studio time, and I had like this song,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, I guess, 2010. I was kind of like
Mm-hmm.
sing rapping, like when you sing really,
Yeah.
almost like you're rapping. Similar experience. My mom's like always like, you should put that song out. That song is a hit, and I'm like, Mom, can't. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No. Oh no, no. I'm sorry.
no, you Massimo, you. I'm sorry. I'm excited.
No, well that was like I never had one of those moments because I was always in the zone, and like I still am. Where like I get self conscious about my music. I think like sometimes it's like oh, what am I expressing? How am I expressing myself? What am I doing? This and that. All that kind of jazz, right? All that fun gets in the way. So I never thought like lyrically. Which is funny because my mom's always been like very similar, the same big proponent. Like I was doing like the church choir stuff, and she'd be like, you should try writing songs. Oh, I love your voice. Oh, come on, like you gotta write songs. I want to hear you sing. And of course I'm just like a self-conscious teenager just dealing with life, and I'm like, no, stop, no, I don't want that. Like and then I got into college, and of course I was starting on bass, I was doing combos. I love her to death, completely supportive, very supportive in my endeavors. She would come out to all those combos concerts. It was a great old time. And at the end of all of them, I would hear her say, but are you going to do any singing soon? Like, I really
Oh,
miss your voice. Like, why don't you do any singing? Why aren't you doing, like, I want to hear you sing. You were so good at it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So, like, even sometimes now I think on that pressure, I'm like, I'm writing songs now. I want them to come out soon. I want to, like, wrap things up because I'm ready just to be making music, and it's a pandemic, so why not? But in my head, I'm just like, yo, these songs better be a hit because my mom's gonna want to hear them. She's gonna want to put those everywhere, like.
yeah. It's true. Writing. I think even more so than performing, like writing or releasing music is more of like a vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think definitely something I've really enjoyed actually is lyric writing. I've done a whole lot of it, which of course no one would know because I take all those words and I'll bury them with me in the grave.
No,
All
Massimo.
those failed attempts. No, but it's like I've gone through like all the like different styles of trying to do like smart lyric writing where it's like, oh, we're gonna do something poppy or fun or whatever, and then it's like I'm feeling angsty or I'm sad for some reason. We're gonna get brooding and we're gonna say really serious things, this and that. But like I've always tried to think on just if I feel like my thing is it comes from like what do I want to express, then I try taking aspects from artists where I really like how they express things. I really like the way maybe they use metaphors or the ways that they just bring this imagery effortlessly. I One of my favorite artists right now for that is Phoebe Bridgers. Um, just something about the way she's able to really kind of bring in like a feeling of a scenario that like she's writing things that are like personal to her but also feels general enough for people to appreciate, which is kind of like a goal for lyrics, right? Like you want to be personal but like you want people to enjoy it and feel relatable too, right, in one way or another. um and just the ways she's able to kind of like use a lot of non-imagery in her lyrics. um it's very much so it feels like she's just telling you a scenario that's happening, but it's actually a whole lot of show don't tell because she's more describing like here's how I'm feeling in this moment of this thing happening, right? Like instead of like, oh, this thing happened and this thing happened, it's more like I noticed the like whatever this and like, right. It's like weird. I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like non-poetry because it's just like this is happening, but in a really smart way. And like, you get what I mean when I tell you. It's like I'm like, oh, like you know what I mean. It's like that, but for an entire song as
Wow.
lyrics, and I'm like, oh, that's vague and perfect. I love that. Like,
Yeah, that is great. I also like songs that artists write where they say something so simple, but it's like that's something I would say. Like
mhm,
the Stevie Wonder song that says, "I just called to say I love you." I say that to my mom all the time. I just called to say, I love you.
mhm,
Simple things like that, or songs that describe feelings that you haven't been able to put in words. I'm like, wow, how did they do that?
mhm.
Yeah. So, what would you say is the difference between producing for yourself or others
Oh.
versus others? So you give yourself the good sounds and everyone else gets the bad sounds.
Oh no! Oh no! What do I get? I get the songs that never come out because I'm so nitpicky. I get the alone time for better and for worse. Uh, yeah. I'm a huge believer of like music is meant to be shared and be done together and to be collaborative. Everything you do is going to work with others and like enjoy it because that's how you're communicating and you're both taking your ideas and putting them together. Um, I've been wanting to branch out more with doing producing for others in general. The big caveat to that, and a bit of the extra push on me to be like, okay, I got to put stuff out, is the fact of like not a lot of people know I produce, and I don't actually have a lot of references for things I've produced because I don't really produce for others often because I haven't, because I produce for myself mostly, and then I don't share that anywhere. So no one knows what I can do or what that sounds like, right? And it's like that's a poor investment for anyone who wants a song produced. They have no idea what I'm doing. But I do want to just like post things out so people have an idea. I might even just make like a little like production reel or whatever and be like, here are all these styles of stuff I can do or whatever. Because there's a lot of styles I'm confident with, like that I wouldn't make for myself and my own sound. Like I would love making a great like hip hop or like trap beat. I would never use that for myself. What am I gonna do with that? Um, but just working with others, it's a great collaborative effort because everyone else thinks of ideas that I won't think of, and they think of them in ways that I wouldn't get to because we're different. Um, and just especially when you're working with an artist and they're like, I have this song idea, right? And like they wrote it. Maybe it comes from like a chord progression they have with some lyrics on it. Maybe they have even more like fleshed out, like they know what kind of synth sounds they want, or they know this and that they want, right? Either way, like as a producer, you're kind of being given someone's personal stake, and it's got this really big handle with care banner on it, right? Um, and it's great because I get to do a lot of creative things within that sphere of I know what they want, I know things that can sound good to complement that. Um, but then also just to have that communication of if they think of a new idea, if they like something I did and they want it to go somewhere else, they think of something else they want to put in. Maybe they didn't like something I did, and that's okay, right? And then we can talk more about like, you find the shape of what is the song that's in their head. How are we bridging this together and making it? What is that idea they had? And that's just always just such a fun collaboration to me, right? Like always discovering what the song wants to sound like, basically bringing that together. It's just really fun. You get to do it with friends and with colleagues.
Yeah, that's so true, Massimo. What would you say your mission is as an artist?
Oh gosh. Um I mean, constant constant learning, constantly getting better at it. I think it's just too all of it is too fascinating to not get better at it. You know what I mean? Like just when it comes to the science behind mixing and how everything's happening, even on like a physics level, and just how we're hearing things. This sounds good because you EQ it in this way, this and that, whatever. All the weird like nitty gritty textbook stuff. There's so much in there that it's just like a shame to not know more, so you can make things sound even better, right? Um, and it's the same with writing music, trying to make new sounds, collaborating with people. Like I'm not one of those people who's really out there like, oh man, I want to make it big. Like I want to have hits, I want to do this and that. because I don't care about fame. I don't care about like. That's such a funny thing to talk about, especially just like hi, I freelance audio engineer and I do work at a church. But like, like the idea of like I hear what's on the radio and I'm like, I want to make that. I need to be able to make that, right? Not for the fact of, oh, it's on the radio. I need like I'm for the fact of I'm like, this sounds good. And I need to know how to do that. And I need to get there in doing that, which means I just need to constantly be learning more. And it's great because, it's like with anything, the more you learn, the newer horizons open up. One understanding comes with 10 more questions and like new things you can jump into. And to me, that's just the most fun about it. Just one of those things that it doesn't stop. And at least thankfully I'm seeing as long as I keep getting better at it, it can hopefully turn into a career that keeps paying off. Keeps
That's
making
so
the
great.
parents happy, yeah.
Yeah. That's so great, Massimo, because that's like one of the biggest misconceptions I think I had about growing up and like taking piano lessons. I thought like one day I'm going to get to the point where I've just mastered this. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's over. I've learned everything, and it's like every day, you're constantly learning. But Massimo,
Mm-hmm.
one other thing that you have going. I think you are very community oriented. I think you're always there to help others. Make people's dreams come true, bring their virtual entertainment to reality.
I mean,
Where
I
does
hope,
that
yeah.
come from, Massimo? You're always like ready to help.
Where does that come from?
Yeah, you're always ready to help. Anything I've ever done, anything that anyone ever
Uh,
asked you to do, you're like, okay, I'll help. I'll join
I'm.
in.
I mean, I just like people. Like I like. It goes back to the collaboration thing. It's like to me, it's just time, and it also kind of went back to the time management, especially because it was like I'm gonna be on my own. I'm gonna hang around, whatever. I might lose track of time, lose track of maybe what's a little more productive to do, right? But if I'm helping people or like working on things with others, it always just kind of felt way more productive. Because there was always an experience, there was always something I was learning too, right? Even if it was objectively something where it was like I'm literally teaching someone how to do something else or I'm helping them with this something or whatever. It's like but I'm learning maybe how to relate with others better, learn more about someone's situation, the way they think. I'm learning about maybe different approaches that people have towards something or towards a skill. It might even be as simple as like, I'm learning how my friend's day is going that day, right? Well, maybe we're like pushing some instruments or some like stands around or something, right? Um, and to me, that's all just valuable and like, I don't know if this is kind of crazy talk, but I think people play and perform, and to me, they kind of sound how they are as a person.
Yeah.
I think I like that's something I kind of notice. And it's just who you are as an individual when brought to music and when you're creating, how you are treating that outwards expression becomes this huge and valuable like communication,
Yeah.
right? So I think even when it would just be like having a chat with friends or like, hey, we got to go clean up a room or something, or we got to go like do this thing or this and that, or like, can you help me with something? I'm doing some project. What can we do here or there? It's just learning more about people, and the more you learn about people, the more you learn why they do what they do and how they do what they do, and it helps you understand why maybe even I'm doing what I do and how everyone else does it. And it's just helpful. It's great.
Yeah. One moment sticks out to me, Massimo. So it
Mm-hmm.
was the first semester of my sophomore year, or maybe it was the second semester, and it was my first time doing jazz combos. And you're in
Okay.
my combo,
Oh
you're
yeah.
a player, and I bought a chart in, and like the band, like I think something was wrong on the chart. Something probably was wrong on the chart, and they weren't playing the rhythm right. And you like went to the chalkboard and wrote the rhythm out, and you said, "It's just this, guys. It's just this." And I was like, "Oh wow, thank you for saving me."
Oh no.
So ever since that moment, I was like, "Wow, that is my friend."
Oh, and I hate. I mean, hindsight 2020, and like we all grow and develop. I hate that my educational moment was like, guys, it's just this. Like, come on, like, and
It makes
I'm
me feel better.
I'm sure it wasn't that wasn't my attitude towards it, but like I hate being that person that's just like, what are you not getting? It's just this. And
Maybe.
everyone's like, I'm not getting the rest of it. I'm not getting it. So it being that is what I'm not getting, like, right, like not explaining it. But I think, yeah, I think we tried I remember that it was like some hits that we needed like the drums cutting in with. Um I think we just kind of like clapped it out or something, or like I like played stuff on bass or whatever. And I think once we kind of had the drums locked in on it, it kind of worked in with everyone else. But yeah, I mean, because it was like one of those situations where I was just like, no, like the chart's here, like we've got this, right? And it's like part of if I ever end up as a bigger educator, oh boy, I'd want to learn how to explain things better as well, because a bit of my thing is like I've noticed sometimes I don't want to say something where it sounds like I'm talking down at someone, because it's like I'm not. I'm just trying to like
You
I'm.
don't do that, Massimo.
I don't know though, but like
You
I
know.
want to. I'd want to make sure like I'm just like maybe covering a potential gap, but it always comes from like like I just remember me being like, oh yeah, well it's just this, from like the knowledge of like, oh yeah, but these guys know that, like maybe if we just like look at it in a different way or something, like, but they know exactly what this is, they've played it before, like they have the knowledge there, so it's just getting them there. But yeah, that was a fun time. That was a good combo. That was also we had a Hui in that semester as well, which is great. It was a
I miss those times,
very
Massimo.
good time. I know. Oh,
Okay, fun
combos.
question. Don't give too many details about this one.
Final.
Okay, Lottoteca or Ultra Beam?
Oh no. Oh no. Oh. Um. You know, I just I'm thinking of the details to omit. Nothing's gonna replace in my mind, like, and they're sorry, let me play both crowds. They're both good, both wonderful, both fantastic times and events. Um
I think the Mason Jazz dinners
that's yours, like the
at Lottoteca. I think it's the Mason Jazz dinners.
yeah, but I don't know. There was something about, I remember it was we did it for a couple of them. I don't remember what events it was. I know one of them was like a big like school wide one. Another might have been just a like vocal concert. But just having some like after hangout at Al Shabin. We're all running into a to what will soon be a very dance filled, sweaty environment. Everyone's just got their dress clothes on from the concert earlier in the night. All our performance stuff is still on. We're just tired. We're just happy, right? We just had a good performance. There's something about those kind of like celebration memories to me that I'm like, that was definitely like a slice that like, here's like a bit of like magic. Here's a bit of like all of us just celebrating in something that doesn't quite come back. I
And
don't.
I feel like the Mason Jazz like little family, the little community
Mm-hmm.
we have, those are the moments like I miss the most. And college is such a scam in that way because you have like you lived across the hall from me, you lived
Mm-hmm.
in the same building, and never again would you have like the opportunity to live like down the hall from your friend and
I know. Yeah.
like that.
No. Yeah. And especially just like the building of the Mason Jazz family, and it's just like with the vocal ensemble and just Dr. Purcell's work into making that such like a cohesive group and really making that more of a social community. And now it's gone, and now I'm sad. So I feel like I should be like sending her my therapy bills, being like,
It's really a
like,
grieving process when you
yeah.
graduate. It's like we go through all the stages of loss. Yeah.
Just like, yeah, my therapist says I'm in denial currently. I say I'm getting the group back together, obviously, every night, La Tolteca. So here's a $60, $60 bill.
Massimo, do you have any hidden talents?
Oh gosh. Um I I wish I had something on hand. I don't know where it went.
What?
Maybe there was something old. No, So I actually really like visual art. Um, and when I was doing some food service work, it was at Epicure Cafe. And sometimes we'd have, especially depending on the day, like midweek, and obviously pre-pandemic, but it'd be slower shifts, right? Like I'd get there at 4:30, clean everything up, open at 8 or open at 5. And depending on the night and if there's an event or not, someone might not show up till like 7 or 8. Or even if they do show up, maybe it's like one table or something. I'm just there on my own. So I got really into stippling, which is that art where it's like you just take like a pen or a marker and you're just making dots, and you
Oh,
just make
okay.
an entire thing out of dots. I learned stippling was a very good way to just kill time and really just do that. And I remember I'd like make stuff, and like friends would see it and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh!" Like you, or like I would just like put them on like the receipt papers, or like the little like where we'd write people's order and stuff, because I wasn't writing any orders, nothing was happening. And I would just like be drawing it on there, and like it was like, oh, here's like a little mountain and a little lake view or whatever, and like, oh, this is a little like space thing, ooh, it's all fun, this and that. And I would just like put a little piece of tape, put it on like the little bar glass, and just leave it there or whatever. And I went in one week, and my coworker's like, "Hey, do you have any idea who did this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got like really bored." And he was like, "No, this is really good. What do you mean you got really bored? Also, that's at least like thousands of like dots on like one small piece of paper. What do you mean bored?" And I was like, "Oh, I was passing the time."
Wow, awesome.
So
I didn't know that. I didn't know you draw and stuff.
so
Okay.
maybe I just cemented that I'm gonna have to make my own album covers forever from now on, which will just take even more time.
No, we're not doing that. Okay,
No.
which fictional character would you like to be?
Oh no. Oh gosh. Huh. Interesting. Um. I haven't thought of that.
You can
Uh.
be a TV character, anything.
No, I know. That's what makes it harder. It's anything.
I would be a Disney princess because
Hmm.
princess. No.
I think like I would be any character in like from the movie and like the comic, like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, except for Scott. Right. Well, the whole movie, like I'd be one of the other band members. Right, because the whole idea of like, yeah, we're in our like 20s and we just got our like kind of garage rock like band. We're out in Ontario, California, and whatever. Like that's all cool, right? But like, I don't want to be Scott. I don't want to be Michael Cera, Scott Pilgrim, because the entire story of that is like that's an awful character. He's awful to like women and everyone he comes in contact with, and like literally every woman in the story who he like has any form of a relationship with, like he completely rudely messes up, and like he just like is awful towards. So I'm like, yeah, just any character in the band that isn't him. Um, yeah,
That'd be good, Massimo.
yeah.
Okay, bass or guitar?
Oh, bass. Yeah, I mean, as much as like, I mean, I got like a 6 string bass. Not like an actual. I got a bass six. So like, Fender made this model. In like the 50s, late 50s, where it's essentially just like one of their Jaguar guitars, but they put a longer neck on it and a bigger bridge, so you could put bass strings on it. So it's a guitar, but it's an octave down. So it sounds like a bass, but it has the two higher strings. And then all I do is I retune the two higher strings like a half step up, so that all my scales are still bass scales. So it's kind of like I'm playing a 6 string bass, but it's a lot smaller. And instead of playing from the range of a low B string to a high C string, it's actually just a standard low E string all the way up to a high F string.
Wow.
So you can do a lot of upper extension voicings. You can do a lot more chords that really ring out and aren't like muddy anymore, because now you're playing more in the guitar range. I basically found a way to make a guitar for a little old bass player like me.
Wow, that's great,
But
Massimo. So, wait, your
yeah,
last question.
okay,
Who is your favoriteest friend that fits the following criteria?
okay,
You're singing your combo, they live in Florida, they're interviewing you right now.
yeah. Is it Miss Fort Lauderdale? The Miss
This,
Carlia
you got
Swanson?
it
Did I
right.
get it right?
You got it right.
Yes. Trip to
Thank
Vegas, baby. All right, not in the
you.
pandemic. Nope, not that one.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Massimo.
No, thank you so much for having me.
So everyone give it up for Massimo Zaru-Roque. We'll be back next week, same place, same time, with the artist series for Music is Unity. And have
I
a great
won't be back, but
other people will be back.
yes.
Thank you and have a great night.